32 people injured in a suicide attack in Istanbul targeting Turkish police. Politicians are pointing fingers at the Kurdish rebel group the PKK, but the group is denying responsibility. So who might be behind this attack, and how is Turkey planning to deal with it? This is Inside Story. Hello and welcome to the program. I'm Hud Abdelhamid. On Sunday, a suicide bomber detonated himself in the heart of Istanbul, injuring 32 people, including 15 policemen. Investigators are suspecting the Kurdistan Workers' Party, OPKK, to be behind the attack, but the Interior Minister has warned against rushing to conclusions. The blast coincided with the last day of the unilateral ceasefire declared by the PKK. The international community, including the US, described this attack as a shocking crime and offered assistance in bringing the perpetrators to swift justice. From Istanbul, Anita McNaught reports.
The suicide bomb attack in the heart of Istanbul's commercial district of Taksim Square has brought the chill of violent menace much closer to home.
We will never surrender to such attacks, and they will never win with these attacks. They should ask for their rights in a more democratic way. They can't succeed by killing innocent people.
But the question in Turkey is, who is they? Some commentators have pointed the finger at the Kurdish rights movement, the PKK, but many other non-Kurdish organizations have carried out attacks in Turkey. In November 2003, a group of Turkish nationals inspired by Al-Qaeda carried out multiple suicide attacks in Istanbul, on the HSBC Bank, the British consulate and 2 synagogues, killing more than 60 people, injuring hundreds. And in the 2 weeks before the Taksim Square bombing, Turkish authorities arrested 17 people in Izmir and Istanbul, saying they had ties to Al-Qaeda. In Ankara, in April 2009, a suicide bomber attempted to kill a former justice minister. The organization responsible was the DHKPC, a far-left group opposed to US involvement in Turkey and aiming to set up a Marxist state. The DHKPC also planned to assassinate the Prime Minister, and in 2001 had sent a suicide bomber to explode in Taksim Square. On the morning of this latest Taksim Square bombing, police had raided several houses in Istanbul, detaining at least 15 DHKPC members on terrorism charges. Kurdish groups are still in the frame, and combat between PKK fighters and the Turkish military continues. But this attack in June on a military bus near Istanbul airport was claimed not by the mainstream PKK, but by the TAK, the Kurdistan Freedom Falcons, which has threatened to hit urban, civilian and Western targets. Its leader, Fehman Hussein, split from the PKK last year. Some commentators in Turkey say that split is cosmetic. But a bomb attack on Kurdish civilians in Hakkari province in September, killing 9, seems to show a real division in tactics. The PKK denies responsibility for the latest Taksim Square attack and has extended its ceasefire, which was supposed to end on October the 31st. But Taksim Square's most infamous massacre was carried out in 1977 by Turkish paramilitaries acting covertly in the name of the Turkish state. The chaos that ensued led to a crackdown on Turkey's left-wing movements and a military coup. Destabilizing violence has a long and colourful history in modern Turkey. Anita McNaught, Istanbul, for Inside Story.
Well, joining us now to discuss this issue are our guests. In Ankara, Mehmet Yegim, a researcher on terrorism at the International Strategic Research Organization. Also in Istanbul, Thomas Seibert, the Turkish correspondent at The National. And in Paris, Ibrahim Dogos, the director of The Telegraph. That's a UK-based Kurdish and Turkish language newspaper. Gentlemen, welcome to the show. Mehmet Yegim, let me start with you. The PKK denies involvement in this attack. So does it actually have the hallmarks of any other kind of group? Is there any kind of clue of who could be behind it?
Yes, actually none of the terrorist organization claimed for responsibility for Taksim attacks. and the governmental resources did not announce for a name. So actually it's too early to spell a name that is behind the terrorist attacks. But if we talk about the most likely scenarios, actually the PKK name is at the top of the list. So PKK is actually declared a ceasefire to Turkish government, and its deadline was at the 31st of October, and it coincides with the terrorist attacks. Actually, it's not the interest of the PKK terrorist organization, while their leader Kedre was taking this rhetoric of peace and appeasement. But there are also some other fractions in the PKK terrorist organization, which are hawkish fractions, and we are suspected that there are some penetrations to the PKK terrorist organization from different governmental intelligence services and from different groups. So that may be caused by some of the hawkish fractions which are not very content with, which are not happy with this peace process between the PKK and Turkish government. So they would be quite eager to violate the process between the Turkish government and PKK. So it may be an attack of these hawkish fractions or different groups that are penetrated into PKK terrorist organization.
Well, Ibrahim,
this is the first option, actually.
Okay, let me just bring Ibrahim Dogos into the conversation. Now, the PKK seems to have extended its ceasefire at least until after the general elections in 2011. But could it be a possibility, as we just heard, that actually the PKK leadership doesn't have any more control over offshoot groups and that they are actually acting completely independently at this stage?
That is always a possibility, but I doubt that this would be a PKK attack during a ceasefire. And while PKK was preparing to extend its ceasefire, it is not in the benefit of PKK or any group that claims to be fighting for the rights of Kurdish people in Turkey to carry out such attacks. Kurds are no longer advocating separatism. They are advocating an equality under a common constitution within the Turkish borders, within the country, within the Turkey as a republic. So therefore, there's no logic behind this to blame anything that happens in the west of Turkey, an attack which is against civilians alongside the police, to blame it on PKK. It's too early. Even the Turkish government itself has not named a perpetrator yet. So that means the government itself doesn't yet believe that it's PKK or an offshoot of PKK behind this attack, because in past, we all know clearly any attacks that happens in Turkey, it would have been automatically blamed on PKK. But now we have wider organizations in Turkey which are trying to destabilize the country, which are trying to end the peace process which has just begun between the Kurdish movement and the Turkish state. It could be deep state, it could be people who are linked to Ergenekon, it could be anybody right now. So what Mehmet Yegin was saying, I would say it's too early, and it contradicts what he was actually trying to say, I would say, because if PKK and the Turkish state are they came to a position to start a process or to carry on a peace process, it is unlikely that anybody who has anything to do with Kurds or PKK would be behind these attacks.
Well, certainly the timing has raised many questions, as you just pointed out. So, Thomas Seibert, I'm just wondering, what is your opinion? Who do you think could be behind this attack?
I agree with the two other colleagues that the PKK does not have an interest right now to spoil an atmosphere that for the first time in years could bring about an end to this conflict. Only 3 days before this attack, the acting PKK leader Murat Karayilan used an interview with a Turkish newspaper to say that the PKK would no longer target civilians. 3 days later, 17 civilians are wounded in an attack in the heart of Istanbul. That doesn't fit together. So either Mr. Karayilan is totally cynical or somebody else committed this act, and I think the latter possibility is the most probable. The question as to who did it is very difficult to answer right now. It might be splinter groups within the PKK that want to sabotage this peace process. It might be elements within the state security services who want to sabotage the peace process. Nobody knows right now.
Well, Mehmet Yegim, do you think that the so-called deep state could have a hand into this?
Yeah, of course, there is this economy of terrorism in Turkey, that there are so many different actors which are breeded by this terrorist organization and PKK activities. So with the PKK terrorist organization and its actors, there is also this side of which they call actually deep state. But I do not want to call it as deep state. It's an illegal activity. It's not about the state. I don't want to attach it to the state. These guys may want to continue the status quo about the PKK terrorism. So they may be provocate, or they may be aborted the process as well. That's one of the possibilities as well. But I think that there are some other options as well. We should talk about that. That Al-Qaeda is one of the options, I think, because there is this two packages found in Dubai and Britain, which are aimed to the U.S., the Chicago, and I think that Turkey is maybe one of the targets of Al-Qaeda, and this attack may be a part of the wave of Al-Qaeda attacks to the U.S. and its allies as well. I think this is another option. And there is this DHKPC terrorist organization, which police had operated and arrested 16 members of this terrorist organization. And this may be another option as well. But it's quite early, as I said before, to name a terrorist organization that's behind these attacks.
Well, Thomas Seibert, even though it's too early to name an organization behind this attack, it seems that in Turkey, the public and some politicians usually immediately point the finger at the Kurds. It's just sort of, it seems as it's become a sort of automatic kind of reflex.
That is true, and it is very obvious that it's not happening at this stage, in this case at least. We have the Interior Minister, Mr. Atalay, saying it's too early to draw conclusions. He's warning against early conclusions. Mr. Erdogan, the Prime Minister, is a little bit more clear into who he blames. He's suggesting that the PKK did it, but even he is not saying it outright. And in other attacks, after other similar attacks in Turkey, 24 hours later, everybody was talking about the PKK. So I think it is fair to say that Ankara is a little bit more cautious this time. One of the reasons may be that Ankara is picking up its dialogue again with the jailed PKK leader Öcalan on the prison island of İmralı near Istanbul. A leading Kurdish politician, Aysel Tulu, is on the island today talking to Mr. Öcalan, trying to find out if there are any ways to end this conflict that started back in 1984. So there's a process going on here, and it may well be that Ankara is trying its best not to destroy this process by blaming the PKK outright.
Well, that said, Ibrahim Dogus, some opposition parties in Turkey are already calling to reinstate the state of emergency over the southeast of the country.
Correct. I mean, political parties such as National Movement, MHP, will gain from a escalation of a conflict between the Kurds and the Turkish state. But it's, I mean, these sort of political movements are feeding their supporters with the blood, I would say, of young Turkish and Kurdish people, be it a soldier or a guerrilla. So to be able to end this conflict will end their political aspirations, because they will no longer have a position on Turkey. They have no other policies. apart then so-called dangers to the state's unity and so on. Although Kurdish movements, mainly the PKK and Öcalan himself, have declared on various occasions that they are no longer seeking an independent state for Kurdish people, but rather they want to keep the Turkish borders, stay within the, they respect the integrity of Turkish state, they respect the republic itself, but they want to be equal citizens of the republic. But these people doesn't want to hear this, and they have always been unfair towards Kurdish people, and nationalism or radical fanatism has always been bad for Turkey, I would say. If I come to the point of who might be behind this attack, I think it won't be, it's very unlikely that you will see Al-Qaeda behind this attack, because the attackers have not targeted US, UK or Israeli interests. They have targeted Turkish interests. And it is unlikely, with the stance that the Turkish Prime Minister and his government have taken on Gaza and Israel, that such organization could be behind this, because they would see Turkey as being very tough on their enemies, I would say now.
So if you're saying, Ibrahim Dogul, that it's unlikely that it's Al-Qaeda, it's unlikely that's the PKK, so who can be behind it?
I think it could be, it could be one of the extremist left-wing organizations, or another Turkish-based radical Islamic movement, or we can point out to the Ergenekon. Mesut Mehmetyan doesn't want to attach to deep state to the state itself, but it's a state within the state. These are the people who have been feeding from the state. These are the people who have been using the state resources to carry out attacks. In many cases, they have planted terrorist attacks and always blamed on PKK. So they can get the Turkish public opinion on their side, and by having that Turkish public opinion on their side, they have always been able to influence the policymakers, influence the political scene within the Turkey. And these are the people that this government, right now, practically and politically, is also trying to challenge.
Well, Mehmet Yegim, let's consider these, let's say, left-wing political parties. Now, there were some allegations that some of them had received training in the mountains of northern Iraq, in the Kandil Mountains, which are the one of the bases of the PKK. Any truth in those allegations?
I think that's here we're talking about the issue with speculations, and I talked about the most likely scenarios about the attack. So all the options will not really give me such. None of the terrorist organization will shock me about being behind of these terrorist attacks. But here we are talking about the scenarios, and here the date coincides with the end of so-called ceasefire of PKK. So that's why it really points out the PKK. Maybe it's not the main stream of the PKK, maybe it's not the main fraction of the PKK, but there may be as well the fractions, hawkish fractions that really want to violate this process. So it's really pointing out in some way PKK, but what I did not want to attach the deep state because I'm not comfortable with the idea of state having a deep structure. I want to say that these are illegal organizations, and most of them are terrorist organizations. So I don't want to attach those with the state, with the Turkish state. There may be some organizations, there may be some groups that was previously affiliated with the state, but now I don't think they are part of the state anymore. That we can see this through the Ergenekon case process, so that the government and the Turkish state is kind of taking necessary steps to clean these problematic members of these problematic people from its organization, I think.
Well, Ibrahim Doguz, this comes just ahead as of a politically charged year, let's say, for Turkey, with the general elections being in summer 2011. Now, and it also seems to me that whether it turns out that the PKK is behind this attack or not, for many people it will be. It's a matter of perceptions. So how much do you think this issue will be at the forefront of any electoral campaign?
I mean, I think political parties like MHP will use this throughout the months coming now. They will always blame on the PKK and on the Kurds generally, not just the PKK as Kurds from Turkey, but they will also find ways to blame on Kurds in northern Iraq, Kurds in other parts of the neighboring countries. They will always try to make a case that Kurds are a danger to the unity of the state. And they will say, look, unless we have strict border controls, unless we have a state of emergency re-established over the Kurdish regions, we will never be at peace in Turkey as Turkish people. So they will make this case quite, they will use this a lot. But I believe because those sort of political movements have lost a lot of ground to AK Party government and also to CHP, the main opposition party. And because there are less there's less conflict between the guerrillas and soldiers. So we see right now, we see less people because of the ceasefire and so on. We see less contact, less killings, less funerals of soldiers or the guerrillas. And the public, Turkish public or the Kurdish public, will not give too much ground to these sort of claims, I believe. But what will happen is they will try to make use of it, but there's still 6 months, 7 months to the elections, that we might see more terrorist attacks against civilians or against police or against military, against Kurdish civilians, against Kurdish people in the region as well. And no one might claim the responsibility, but it will be used to damage the reputation of AK Party government as well as of the Kurdish BDP party, which are trying very, very hard, I believe, to come to a term for a reconciliation to Kurdish question. So it could be anybody who is not from the country itself, from Turkey. It might be, neighbors. It might be into some other countries or some other international organizations.
Okay, let me just bring Thomas Seibert into the Thomas Seibert. I mean, Prime Minister Erdogan has done what would many see as a lot for the Kurdish people, meaning he has widened their cultural rights. He has allowed televisions to broadcast in the Kurdish language, and he has also allowed or promoted investment in the southeast. When such an attack happens, how much of a standback is it for him, really? How much will it harm any kind of policies he has for that region?
I think in the long run it won't harm Erdogan a lot. He has to balance out a little bit between the nationalists that we just talked about and the Kurds on the other side. The nationalists are saying what Erdogan is doing for the Kurds is going much too far and much too fast. The Kurds on the other hand are saying it's not going far enough, it's not going fast enough. So Erdogan is somewhere in the middle there, but I think that also the last referendum, the constitutional referendum, has shown that Erdogan has a big chunk of the Turkish electorate behind him in this. Even followers of the Kurdish parties with Erdogan on this, because generally I feel that Turkish people are ready to end this conflict now. I totally agree with the opinion that positions that the Nationalist Party, MHP, is putting forward are a little bit behind our times. That's over. I think most Turks would agree that it's time to sit down and get this matter over with, to get the fighting over with. I think Kurds and Turks are both tired of this, and I think Erdogan is part of Erdogan's genius as a politician is that he has sensed this. He has sensed this political potential that is there, and he's trying to milk it. And that's why I think that in the long run, these peaks of terrorism, these peaks of violence are not going to hurt him too much when we look at the elections in the coming summer. I think he still can be comfortable that he wins the election. I think at the end of the day, the economy will probably play a much bigger role then. But in the Kurdish question, I think Erdogan is on pretty firm ground.
Well, gentlemen, we have reached the end of this program. So I'd like to thank in Ankara Mehmet Yegim, in Istanbul Thomas Seibert, and in Paris Ibrahim Dogos. And thank you so much for joining us here on this edition of Inside Story. We welcome your comments and suggestions. Please email them to us at insidestory@aljazeera.net. From the team here in Doha, goodbye for now.